Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The United States says it's up to the Afghan security forces to defend their country after the Taliban captured a sixth provincial capital. At a press briefing, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said the U.S. military cannot do much if the Afghan forces are not putting up a fight. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy Zalmi Khalilzad is heading to Qatar to press the Taliban to stop their offensive. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has issued a decree forming a new government under Prime Minister Hussein al-Nosra. The country is grappling with a major economic crisis in the wake of a 10-year civil war. North Korea has warned that the US and South Korea will face even greater security threats for going ahead with scheduled joint military drills. Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong denounced the drills as the most vivid expression of Washington's hostile policy towards Pyongyang. This comes as the US and South Korea begin their preliminary military drills today. Brazil's daily COVID-19 cases and deaths continue to drop as it reported over 12,000 new infections and over 400 fatalities. In Pakistan, 86 more people have lost their lives to the virus, while nearly 3,900 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 203 million people so far. Football sensation Lionel Messi has reportedly reached an agreement to join Paris Saint-Germain following his departure from Barcelona. The cash-strapped Spanish club had said it could not afford to keep the 34-year-old Argentinian superstar. Messi had scored a record 682 goals for Barca since he joined the club at the age of 13. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. The United States says it's up to the Afghan security forces to defend their country after the Taliban captured a sixth provincial capital. At a press briefing, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said the U.S. military cannot do much if the Afghan forces are not putting up a fight. Details in this report.
As the deadline for the withdrawal of the foreign troops from Afghanistan nears, the Taliban keep making major advances across the country. In the overnight raids, the group claims to have captured the last remaining army base in the Nijrab district of Kapisa province. The Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid also claimed to make advances in the Puli Kumari city of Baghlan province. However, Pentagon spokesperson Kirby said that the security situation in Afghanistan is not going in the right direction. He said that the United States is deeply concerned about the trend, but the Afghan security forces have the capability to fight the insurgent group.
The Secretary shares the concern of the international community about the security situation in Afghanistan, which is clearly not going in the right direction. The Secretary continues to believe that the Afghan forces have the capability, they have the capacity to make a big difference on the battlefield.
Kirby also called on the Afghan security apparatus to use the superior military edge that it holds over the Taliban.
They have an air force the Taliban doesn't. They have modern weaponry and organizational skills the Taliban doesn't. They have superior numbers to the Taliban. And so, again, they have the advantages, and it's really now their time to use those advantages.
However, in an interview, Afghanistan's former president Hamid Karzai said it was the United States military activity in Afghanistan in the name of fighting the Taliban that was causing immense suffering to the Afghan civilians. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad is heading to Qatar to press the Taliban to stop their offensive. In another development, Germany has rejected calls for returning soldiers to Afghanistan after the Taliban took Kunduz, where German troops were deployed for a decade.
Now, for more on this, we have with us Muhammad Ayaz Wazir, former ambassador to Afghanistan from Peshawar. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Now, if Afghan forces are superior in both military tech and in numbers, why are they losing ground to the Taliban?
Well, I think Taliban are coming around the main cities. They have not yet taken any major city except for some capitals or provinces of the north, which were defended by the American more than the Afghans. I think the Afghan forces are concentrating and defending the major cities like Mazar Sharif, Kabul, Jalalabad, Kandahar, because I'm sure you know Kandahar, where the fighting is going on for the last so many days. The Taliban wants to make an inroad into the city, but the Afghan forces are defending. So the fight is for capture of one of the two, I would say, like Kandahar or Mazar Sharif. But now that the Americans have come in with heavy bombardment, and I believe still more have to come, the use of drone and other weaponry that they have to push the Taliban back or reduce their attack on Ashraf Ghani's government, that is yet to come. But we have to see what happens.
Right. Is this statement by the United States that it's up to the Afghan security forces to defend their country a clear indictment of the Kabul administration?
Yeah, well, true, the Afghan forces have to defend. In fact, they were defending even when the Americans were sitting in Afghanistan. The front line or the first line of defense were the Afghan soldiers fighting Taliban. The Americans were simply giving them air cover. Now, it is 100% for the Taliban that way. For the Afghan troops to defend their country against the Taliban. With the U.S. gone, obviously it is for them to defend themselves.
Right. Also tell us, U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad is once again on a mission to pursue the Taliban to stop their advances. What leverage does the United States have on the Taliban, and what can Washington offer them?
Well, the agreement between the two in Doha was obviously for not killing each other, but that I think was limited till the withdrawal of the Americans from Afghanistan. And at the same time, if we look at the deal that the American made with the Afghan government while they were making with the Taliban in Doha, the agreement made with the Afghan government was that the U.S. will provide security to them. And even before that, if you recall, when Ashraf Ghani took over, the first thing that he did in 2014 was to sign a defense deal with the American, which his predecessor, Hamid Karzai, has refused to sign. So under those deals, the Americans are bound to defend, and they have said it openly that we are taking our soldiers out of Afghanistan, but we are not abandoning Afghanistan. Obviously, they are there. I mean, the Americans, as they say, are neighbor of every country. They are everywhere. They are close by. They are in the sea. They are in Doha and in other close by countries. They have the capability of flying their B-52s up to higher than 80,000 altitude, where I don't think any country in the region is capable of stopping them from there. So if, as they say, they start bombing from the sky, then what can anyone do?
Right. Muhammad Ayaz was the former ambassador to Afghanistan. Thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now, Washington has reiterated its commitment to continue improving the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin spoke with Pakistan's Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, over the phone. In a readout of the call, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Austin and Bajwa discussed the mutual goals of security and stability in the region. They discussed the ongoing situation in Afghanistan and the bilateral defense relationship more broadly. The Pentagon chief expressed his interest in building upon the multiple shared interests in the region. Now, for more on this, we have with us Rustam Shah Mohammed, former ambassador to Afghanistan from Peshawar. Thank you very much for your time. Now, sir, with the situation in Afghanistan in view, what does the Pentagon reaching out to Pakistan's military signify?
But if I could understand your question correctly, this is a moment when, in a last-ditch effort, the Americans are trying to persuade the Taliban to begin serious negotiations aimed at a settlement in Afghanistan without resorting to war, attacks, assaults on Afghan army, Afghan installations. And for this purpose, Zalmay Khalilzad has now flown into Doha, and he is conducting negotiations with Taliban representatives in Doha. But I believe the time is fast running out. And very soon, these negotiations perhaps would become irrelevant because we are being overtaken by events all the time. So this is the last opportunity. America wants Pakistan somehow pressure or persuade Taliban to abandon attacks and assaults on Afghan army and Afghan government installations. That is simply not going to happen. The Taliban, Pakistan have some influence, but Pakistan doesn't control their policy or their actions. Whenever their core or strategic interests are concerned, Taliban take their own decisions. And now, when they are in the middle of a battle, when in the last 6 days, as many as 6 provincial capitals have fallen to them, why should they now agree to a negotiated settlement when the odds are heavy in their favor? So I think unless the Americans pressure Ashraf Ghani rather than pressuring Pakistan or Taliban, the stalemate is going to continue, the battles are going to continue, and the people who are going to suffer most are the rank and file Afghans and civilians who are being displaced by hundreds of thousands every day. The Americans can pressure Ashraf Ghani to agree to make room for a transitional government. That is the only viable, practical, pragmatic solution for ending the conflict. And unless that is done, I think the fighting would continue.
So, looking forward to your comment on this. The Kabul government has been running a vicious anti-Pakistan campaign, blaming it for the failures of President Ashraf Ghani. Now, the United States has now categorically held President Ghani's government and the Afghan army of being inadequate in the fight against the Taliban, despite superior technology and numbers. So, tell us, how badly has this statement by the United States dented this anti-Pakistan propaganda by the Afghan government?
Well, I think this is not unexpected. As the government becomes more vulnerable, more fragile, and the Taliban's string of victory continues, they would find scapegoats. And one obvious scapegoat is Pakistan and Pakistan's alleged support to Taliban. How can they prove or document any Pakistani supporters of the Taliban crossing over into Afghanistan, joining their ranks with the help of the Pakistan government? Can they prove any instance? Can they document any example of that? So I think these are just efforts to divert attention. This is not going to pay off. This is not going to work. Now the ground realities would dictate the outcome of the situation. The ground dynamics, the hard realities are that the Taliban are moving forward in northern Afghanistan, except for Mazar-e-Sharif. The entire northern Afghanistan is under their control. And soon they would launch very decisive battles for Kandahar, for Lashkar Gah, and for Herat. Upon the outcome of those battles would depend how Afghanistan is going to shape up in the near future, in the next few weeks. So the coming few weeks, in my mind, in my judgment, are going to be very critical. If the Taliban momentum is halted, even then fighting would continue throughout the country. But if the Taliban momentum is unchecked and they go on to take control of more areas, I think then the inevitable is going to happen, and that is that the Taliban would have to then form a multi-ethnic, broad-based government that has the support of all factions and all ethnic groups. That is how the situation looks like now at this moment in time.
Right, we're also talking about propaganda, so we cannot miss out India. And India and Afghanistan are portraying as if Islamabad's ties with Washington have totally broken down. What is your take after repeated US top officials' calls to Pakistan's leadership for improving ties?
Well, I think India is no longer relevant in the current scheme of things. It is going to wait and see how the situation evolves and develops in Afghanistan. If the Taliban were to form a government, I'm sure the Indian government would try to work out some relationship with them, and I think the Taliban would also like to establish some relations with India. India is a big donor, investor. Then India also needs the Central Asian oil and gas resources through Afghanistan, and India has invested millions in Chabahar port that connects with Afghanistan. So India has interest, India has stakes also in a peaceful Afghanistan. Of course, with Pakistan, it's another story. But as far as Afghanistan's stability and peace is concerned, I think India also would be interested to protecting their investment and to promoting trade and commerce with Central Asia through a peaceful, stable Afghanistan.
Right. Now, Rustam Shah Mohammed, former ambassador to Afghanistan from Peshawar, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now, Pakistan says India's belligerent policies driven by its extremist Hindutva ideology pose a pervasive threat to international and regional peace. In a written statement submitted to the 15-member UN Security Council, Ambassador Munir Akram said, New Delhi has nuclearized the Indian Ocean and continues to induct advanced weapon systems. He said, however, Pakistan would continue to take all necessary measures to maintain full-spectrum deterrence. Akram urged the international community to realize that a military conflict in South Asia could endanger stability in the entire region, which is key to global peace, security and trade. Now, in India, opposition Congress party leader Rahul Gandhi has called for the restoration of statehood for occupied Kashmir. He was addressing his party workers during a visit to the region nearly 2 years after Prime Minister Narendra Modi revoked its special status. Gandhi went on to say that the Indian constitution is under attack by the right-wing ruling party. Earlier in his speech, Congress leader Ghulam Nabi Azad urged Gandhi to ask the government to bring a bill to restore the statehood of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Moving on, our Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has issued a decree forming a new government under Prime Minister Hussein al-Nurs. He was designated as Prime Minister last August to replace Imad Khamis, who was fired amid a severe economic crisis in the wake of his 10-year civil war. The government blames US sanctions on Assad and his entourage for the crisis. Last month, Assad took the oath for a fourth term in office after a presidential election in May 2020. Western powers have dismissed the election as a farce. Now, Russia says the US armed forces have no legal mandate to stay in Syria. The Russian embassy in Washington responded to a tweet by a spokesperson for the US Operation Inherent Resolve, Wayne Morato. The embassy termed the US interpretation of a UN Security Council resolution ridiculous. It called on the relevant US authorities to review the resolution thoroughly. Earlier, Morato tweeted that the US forces are stationed in northeastern Syria under international law. Syria views US military presence as an occupation as they entered the country without an invitation from the government. Now, Russia and China are holding a large-scale military exercise in north-central China involving more than 10,000 troops. In a statement, Russia's defense ministry said the Cebu Cooperation 2021 drills aim to strengthen bilateral ties. It said the drill will demonstrate the ability of both states to fight terrorism and jointly protect peace and stability in the region. Moscow sent Sukhoi Su-30 SM fighter aircraft, motorized rifle units and air defense systems to the exercise. Russian media says the drills taking place are until Friday and mark the first time that Russian soldiers would use Chinese weapons. And the US has warned Iran that it will have to pay the price for the attack on an Israeli-operated tanker off the coast of Oman. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was addressing a meeting of the UN Security Council on maritime security. Blinken said Iran's provocative behavior threatens freedom of navigation and international shipping. He urged international community to hold Iran accountable for its actions. The top US diplomat warned a failure to do so will fuel impunity and embolden others to disregard the maritime order. Now, the US has slammed Iran and the Houthis for prolonging the Yemen crisis. US Special Envoy to Yemen, Tim Landerking, said the militia is preventing a ceasefire through their offensive in the Marib region. Talking to reporters, Landerking accused Iran of backing the Houthis, saying it is not ready to play a constructive role. He termed the situation in Yemen dire and one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. However, he announced to provide $165 million in a new humanitarian assistance for the country. He said Washington is supporting efforts to prevent famine, which is turning out to be a real threat. Now, North Korea has warned that the US and South Korea will face even greater security threats for going ahead with the scheduled joint military drills. This comes as the US and South Korea begin their preliminary military drills today. Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, denounced the drills as the most vivid expression of the US hostile policy towards Pyongyang. In a statement, Kim said the exercise threatens the North Korean people and raises tensions in the region. She termed Washington's talk of diplomacy a hypocritical cover for aggression on the Korean peninsula. The North Korean leader noted peace will only be possible if the US dismantled its military force in South Korea. She said Pyongyang will boost its absolute deterrence to counter the ever-increasing US military threat. Now, for more on this, we have with us James Dorsey, political analyst from Singapore. Thank you very much for your time, James. Now, tell us, James, President Joe Biden had criticized Donald Trump, accusing him of warming up to dictators like Kim Jong-un. Now that Biden is in power, how big of a factor would that play in Washington's ties with North Korea?
Well, I think what is clear is that the Biden administration has not put a major priority on resolving issues with North Korea. The Koreans may have thought that they had made some progress with the somewhat recent warming of ties with South Korea, but then again, of course, saw next week's preparations for major military exercises, and I think realized that they haven't gotten a step further one way or the other.
Right, Seoul and Pyongyang recently revived the telephonic link, which appeared to have somewhat melted the ice. But actually, how far is the world from North Korean denuclearization?
I don't think we're a step closer. In fact, we may be even a step in the other direction. So, with other words, the North Koreans clearly, one, they are economically very pressed, and their ability to raise funds illicitly and legitimately abroad has been significantly impaired in recent weeks. You've seen measures in terms of the risk of North Koreans having contact abroad with family members has increased, which means also that the ability to get remittances into the country or for smugglers has reduced significantly. You've seen embassy drawbacks in terms of looking for cheaper premises. So the North Koreans are hurting economically. They need some sort of breakthrough on the nuclear issue. They're not getting it, and their strategy is to escalate in the hope that that's going to work, but that hasn't worked in fact until now.
Right, James, also tell us, at most times South Korea has appeared rather reluctant in backing any step that might upset Pyongyang, yet Washington eventually has its way. If given a choice of not being under the US influence, do you believe that ties between North and South Korea would improve?
Well, I think that basically, I'm not sure that the United States is the obstacle to an improvement of relations between South Korea and North Korea. I think what you're seeing is something of a difference between the South Koreans and the Americans when it comes to the tactics one employs to try and get the North Koreans to the table. Fact of the matter is that neither the American tactic nor the South Korean tactic has worked. And therefore, it really is a question of managing tensions rather than resolving issues.
Right, James Dorsey, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Well, now the US and China have traded bombs at the United Nations Security Council over the South China Sea. Both sides blamed each other for threatening peace and stability in the region. Addressing a meeting on maritime security, China accused the US of stirring up trouble by sending military vessels and aircraft into the territory. Beijing's Deputy Envoy to the United Nations, Dai Bing, called the US biggest threat to peace and stability in the South China Sea. Earlier, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that a conflict will have serious global consequences for security and commerce. Blinken said Washington is concerned over what he called provocative actions to advance unlawful maritime claims. Now, China has decided to recall its ambassador to Lithuania and demanded its government recall its ambassador from Beijing as well. This comes after Taiwan's establishment of a diplomatic mission in Lithuania as a separate state. Chinese Foreign Ministry said Lithuania's allowing the office to open under the name of Taiwan severely undermines China's sovereignty. It said the move disregards China's repeated warnings of potential consequences of undermining the One China policy. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. Brazil's daily COVID-19 cases and deaths continue to drop as it reported over 12,000 new infections and over 400 fatalities. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 203 million people so far. More details about the pandemic in this report.
The Delta variant of coronavirus causing new highs in daily infections and deaths is prompting nations to ramp up containment measures all over again. In the U.S., the Defense Department is seeking presidential approval to make coronavirus vaccines mandatory for all members of its military. COVID-19 hospitalizations continue to surge in America's deep South states, while intensive care units near capacity in multiple locations. Meanwhile, the number of children hospitalized with COVID-19 is also rising across the country, a trend health experts attribute to the Delta variant.
It is considered a fourth wave here, and it's due to the Delta variant, plain and simple. The Delta variant is the most contagious variant of COVID yet known. This Delta variant now comprises well over 90% of our cases in children and adolescents.
In France, an extension to health pass has come into effect after the fourth weekend of massive countrywide protests. The Italian police shut down several groups on the Telegram app where users were selling fake health passes. Meanwhile, a new study has suggested that the UK is on course to hoard up to 210 million spare vaccines by the end of the year. As Australia's largest city struggles to contain its worst outbreak, harsher restrictions have stoked resentment.
But people are going through a really tough time, both financially and mentally. And the only way out of this is together. Together we'll come out of this a much stronger community. As I said, it's mate, people waking up every morning, police helicopters. I got a call last night at midnight, a message at midnight last night with someone complaining that their kids can't go to sleep because there's a helicopter on top of their house flying very low.
This comes as a New South Wales state reports the biggest daily rise in cases. Meanwhile, in Iran, one person is dying with COVID-19 every 2 minutes as the region's worst-hit nation reported a record daily toll of fatalities.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has topped 24,000 after 86 people died over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the virus infected over 3,800 people overnight. The ministry said the caseload has crossed 1,075,000 mark. It said over 967,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The ministry added Pakistan's positivity rate has risen to nearly 8%. Over 37 million people have been partially vaccinated, while over 7 million have received both jabs of the inoculation. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan inaugurated the ship lift and transfer system at the Karachi shipyard. Addressing the inaugural ceremony, the Prime Minister said Pakistan must end reliance on imports and attract foreign investment. He said his government has taken important steps to end money laundering. The Premier added Pakistan is on the path to achieve prosperity. He also lauded Chief of Naval Staff Amjad Niazi for taking the initiative to launch the ship lift and transfer system. Now, Iraq's Foreign Minister Dr. Fuad Hussain will arrive in Islamabad on an official visit on the 11th of August. He will be arriving on the invitation of his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. The Foreign Office said too will deliberate on bilateral relations and cooperation in various fields. It added the Iraqi Foreign Minister will also call on Pakistani leadership. The visit comes in the backdrop of a number of ministerial-level visits from both sides in the past few months. Earlier, Foreign Minister Qureshi visited Iraq in May, and further high-level exchanges are planned in the coming months. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, at least 3 people have been killed as tensions over the fuel scarcity descended into deadly violence involving guns, knives and hand grenades. In a statement, the army said 1 man was killed in the northern Dania region and 2 others in Tripoli in violence. Lebanon's currency has lost more than 90% of its value in less than 2 years, causing shortages of fuel, electricity and medicines. The crisis deepened this week, prompting long lines at petrol stations. Protests also continue across the country, with political elite in deadlock over the formation of a new cabinet. Now, at least 8 people have died and 5 others are injured after a boat capsized off the coast of Beihai in South China's Guangxi, Zhuang region. The vessel capsized while returning from a fishing trip. Authorities said the boat was carrying more than 30 people. They said search and rescue efforts are underway. As smoke from raging forest fires in Siberia has reached the North Pole for the first time in recorded history. Russian authorities said the situation in the region, also known as Sakha, continues to deteriorate. More on global wildfires in this report.
From Siberia to Peru, wildfires are raging in several places worldwide, with hundreds of lives lost and thousands evacuated. Many parts in southern Europe have been reduced to ashes amid the region's most extreme heat wave in 3 decades. Blazes in the 2 districts of Turkey's southwestern Magla province are still not controlled after over a week. The European Union has mounted one of its largest firefighting operations ever to fight Greek and Italian fires. In Italy, the Civil Protection Authority warned of more fires as temperatures in parts of the country reach 45 Celsius. Meanwhile, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis apologized for failings in tackling the fire. This came as hundreds of protesters gathered outside Parliament over the government's handling of wildfires.
There is is a lot of rage in the public because the government has not staffed the forest fire brigade puts out fires in the forests and not the regular firefighters, but they dismantled them, and this is why we are burning now.
Infernos are also sweeping across Bolivia's eastern lowlands, threatening thousands of hectares of land with rich wildlife. In the U.S., firefighters continue to tackle California's Dixie Fire, which is now the second largest in state history. Pires Cusco is burning as well, with winds whipping up fresh flames as soon as they're put out.
This is now an extreme case. It is put out and then it is reactivated with the wind. We want it put out once and for all. Bring in the helicopter, put it out with water so that the fire is not reactivated again. Because later on, at around 1 to 3 p.m., the wind will start up and will reactivate the fire again.
Africa is also not spared from this global scourge. In Algeria, 4 people have died and 3 are injured in fires in mountainous areas east of the Algiers.
Meanwhile, Europe's largest active volcano in Italy, Mount Etna, puts on a spectacular display of lava during an eruption. More details in this report.
Etna has been lighting up the night sky regularly with explosions, lava fountains and ash plumes, dazzling onlookers and waking up locals with its roars. Lava flowed down the side of the 3,300-meter-high mountain. Black volcanic ash and big rocks covered streets and nearby towns after the eruption. Etna, which is located above the Sicilian town of Catania, often erupts but rarely causes damage. The camera team filming the images said eruptions continued for more than 5 hours. It is believed to have the longest written record of eruptions than any other volcano, with its first recorded observation going back to 425 BC. Although the eruptions themselves do not put the local population at risk, residents do have to live with the ash showers.
Well, now Mexico's indigenous communities descended on the capital's Zocalo Square to mark the International Day of the Indigenous People. According to the country's Census Bureau, there are some 17 million indigenous citizens in the country. Let's find out about them in this report.
Mexico's indigenous people wore devil masks, performed the dance of the devils, showing the diversity of their culture. The folk devil dance symbolizes the escape of African slaves from Spanish masters.
The reason for this event is to make the indigenous presence in Mexico City visible, for our rights to be recognized by Mexico City government. That is the reason to make us visible. For 12 years now, we have been making ourselves visible annually in this event.
Another indigenous group performed the chinalos with a distinctive white mask and extravagant costumes. According to locals, their performance mimics the complexion and appearance of Spanish colonizers of the colonial era.
It is very important for us, and especially in Mexico City, because it's losing a lot of its culture. Children don't want to speak an indigenous language because they are embarrassed. So this festival is for that, so that children don't feel embarrassed. It's culture. To preserve what we have to look after it.
Although Mexico has adopted the UN declarations on the rights of indigenous people, the country's indigenous people are among its most vulnerable. According to Mexico's National Council for the Evaluation of Social Development Policy, nearly 70% of the indigenous population lives in poverty.
Now, European stocks are trading mixed as investors try to break out from a cautious approach seen globally at the start of the week. The pan-European stock 600 has edged up marginally. Italy's FTSE MIP has added fractionally. Meanwhile, London's FTSE, Frankfurt's DAX and the CAC 40 in Paris are trading flat. Earlier, most Asian stocks gained cautiously with the exception of Seoul's Kospi. Now for the weather updates, we have Hira Mustafa with us.
Thank you. We're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where weather is expected to be extremely hot with temperatures rising to 46 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, temperatures are at 21 degrees Celsius with few raindrops. If we head to Ankara, there is clear weather with temperatures at 29 degrees Celsius. Moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 15 degrees Celsius with thin layer of clouds covering the sky. Now, if you're traveling to Bangkok, there will be an expected thunderstorm with temperatures around 36 degrees Celsius. In Beijing, temperatures are at 31 degrees Celsius with few clouds veiling the sun, while Beirut will experience sunny weather with temperatures at 33 degrees Celsius. Berliners will experience temperatures at 22 degrees Celsius under partly cloudy sky. Heading to Cairo, the hot sun will be out with temperatures at 38 degrees Celsius. Down under the Canberra, the temperatures are at 16 degrees Celsius with a clear sunny sky. In Islamabad, temperatures are at 35 degrees Celsius accompanied by a thunderstorm. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 32 degrees Celsius, also with thunderstorm in forecast. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Hira, for the weather updates. And with that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.